Who would have ever thought that we would see gushers in the metaverse and Dunkaroo NFTs? Yes, go look it up. That day is here, and when it comes to direct-to-consumer experiences, General Mills is not playing it safe. On today's episode, Jensen, the Senior Manager of Global E-commerce at General Mills, discusses how his small but mighty team is creating DTC experiences that go beyond simple transactions on a website. And are websites even a thing that brands will need in the future? Tune in to find out. Before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to our partners, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. They not only help make this podcast possible, but they are the #1 commerce platform. So go check them out at salesforce.com/commerce. Carter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued with your background. I want to start there because, I'm looking at it, I'm like, what haven't you done? You've been a podcast host, you've worked in consultancies, agencies, startups, you've won these awards, Webby Awards, Effie Awards. Like, tell me a little bit about your background and maybe your favorite pieces before we get into General Mills.
Yeah, totally. Well, I appreciate it. And I've been super lucky to have a kind of a crazy background. And you mentioned just the hodgepodge of things that kind of make up my professional life. But yeah, I started kind of in the startup agency world at the beginning of my career. And for those of you who've been in agencies, know that that can take you many different directions with many different clients and many different positions that you might sit in. So did the agency world on and off for the last 10 years and jump between agency life, startup, a couple startups we ran. And then also in consulting. So it really set me up for, I think, a really interesting position here at General Mills, which I know we're going to talk about a bit today. But I'm just super thankful and grateful for kind of having that diversity of background that I've been lucky enough to have.
So why did you get into podcast hosting? Of course, I'm selfishly interested. Like, Carter, why aren't
you
hosting anymore?
ask.
What happened?
Totally. No, for sure. So I was lucky enough to join the OmniTalk podcast, 3-4 years ago, probably. I had some people who I looked up to a lot kind of in the new retail space here in Minneapolis. And I blindly emailed them one day and said, hey, I love your work. Have you ever thought about doing a podcast? And they said, yeah, we'd love to. We just don't know how. And I kind of lied through my teeth. I was like, oh, it's easy. I can do it. I've done it before. And so I'm quickly Googling, how do you make a podcast? Where do you buy microphones, et cetera? Because the next week, I actually went over and was going to record them. And just as we were starting to push record, like, well, why don't you join us as well? I'm like, well, I'd be honored. That sounds great. And it kicked off an incredible, couple of years working with the OmniTalk podcast, and honestly kicked off a great friendship as well. So still follow Chris and Ann and all their work really closely on OmniTalk. And I'm sad I'm no longer with them, but love to follow from afar.
Oh, it's so fun. Yeah, podcasting, I view it as such a great way to learn and bring the smartest people on. And I'm sure it kind of influenced maybe things that you're doing today at General Mills, but
well, yeah. And you never learn more than when you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to and have to quickly come up with a strategic thought, which I found myself in the corner of a lot, where everyone on the podcast was a lot smarter than I was. But you definitely level up when you're around those people.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So tell me a bit about your role at General Mills. What are your main initiatives and what are you most excited about?
Yeah, for sure. So we're a lean, mean team of 4, and we specifically focus on innovation within the global e-com spectrum, right? So a lot of words there, but in summary, really, we look at what are the new and the next opportunities for e-com and grocery. And for me, again, I will say I'm incredibly lucky because there's no category that I think is changing faster, right?
Yep.
And so to think that we can have a part in defining what might be new and what might be next for our brands is an incredibly, amazing place to be. And so my team is based here in Minneapolis. We have a small team here, and then we also have a team out in London. And so we do have an international footprint. And one of the big things that we take on is direct to consumer. So we manage and kind of oversee direct to consumer expansion here at General Mills. And we're expected in the next year to really kind of oversee almost 30 individual DTC storefronts that are each individually managed by the teams, but overseen and supported from behind by our group.
So I want to hear, what is the vision from the top when it comes to direct to consumer? Because we've had quite a few, big brands on the show, and it seems like everyone's a bit different depending on how they're, handling that and how they're viewing the future of direct to consumer.
Yeah, totally. And it's a great question, and a question that we've worked through in multiple different iterations, even in the short tenure I've had at General Mills. When I joined, D2C wasn't a full-fledged capability of the organization. When I first started looking around within the D2C space, we saw these incredible pockets of energy around the organization, really kind of doing some interesting things in D2C. And I knew, and our team knew, that it was a really important part of our future strategy. To what degree and at what size? Not sure, right? But we saw that teams were not only, actually engaged in it, but were unfortunately running into barriers, right? The idea that, they had some really good ideas and were really kind of moving in the right direction. But, from a logistics standpoint, from a technology standpoint, they're running into these barriers that were slowing them down, and worse off, were actually kind of stifling any sort of actual growth within the D2C space. And so I put together kind of a presentation and a pitch to say, I think we need to unify these efforts. I think we need to really look at the tools and capabilities we need to build here to empower these teams to do what we think is right, and really kind of create some of those new kind of value add experiences for our consumers. And so what we did is we, took a step back and built that infrastructure for them. And I think to this day, it's still proving to be really successful. Now, back to your question of what does it mean, and what is the leadership view of it? What we're really excited about is the fact that D2C means different things for every brand, right? It means different things for each one of our different parts of the organization. For some of our, smaller brands, it could mean something different than maybe some of our larger brands who are looking to more sales focused type of opportunities. But the net is we have a capability now that can support whatever strategy comes down the line, and we're excited for the challenges to come.
Love it. So are you coming in, from the top and viewing these brands and saying, okay, these are the ones that should go D2C. These are the ones that aren't. And if so, how are you thinking about that? Is it margins? Is it like, how do you decide which brands should be direct to consumer?
Yeah, totally. So as much as I would love to think that I'm waving, my magic wand and saying, you should be D2C and then you should,
The Carter
at
wand.
the end of the day, yes, exactly. Right. At the end of the day, we work super closely with brand leaders from across the organization, because there's no one who knows their brands, their objectives, their challenges better than the brand leaders, right?
Mhm.
To think that our team could be an expert in all of the brands and every, kind of in and out of everything that's going on, it just isn't real. And so we constantly are partnering with teams, and maybe it's to say we're partnering with Meals and Baking, or partnering with our snacks team to say, we really think there's some opportunity here. Let's find a couple of brands to really kind of push forward. That's how we get involved. And we say, hey, like, new brand, consumer is really ripe for these digital interactions. The margin looks good. Like, this seems to be really ripe for at least a D2C investigation. And so we will push things along from there, but mostly because of the world and kind of the explosion of e-commerce in our space, we have brands knocking on our door every day, really kind of saying, hey, we saw what this brand did. We really think this could be interesting. Or we see our competitors doing X amount of dollars in D2C. Like, why aren't we doing that? Like, what's holding us back? And yeah, for some, there's very clear reasons why it won't work, right? And we help kind of navigate those conversations, and we're very honest, right? Because we built a capability internally, and if people engage, great. If not, no problem, right? But at the end of the day, we love to work with the team again. We're that coach on the sideline as they become the quarterback, enabling them to kind of understand and really see their D2C ambitions come to life without a ton of real investment or kind of time investment from the team.
All right. I love that saying that you guys are the coach on the side and they're becoming the quarterback. Who came up with that? Because that's a good mentality of kind of, making these individual product teams the hero of the story and kind of stepping off to the side and enabling all that to happen. But who came up with that terminology? That's good.
Yeah, I don't know. I should be crediting someone, but I can't exactly think of who did. I'm sure it was someone here at Mills. I'm not going to take credit for it, but we use it all the time, because the last thing these teams need is another cook in the kitchen. Again,
Mhm.
pun works really well around here, right? But there's so many people in these projects, and ultimately that was slowing things down. For us, we've built really kind of what I believe is a magical tech stack that allows teams to really launch D2C sites without a ton of investment, as I mentioned, from a time perspective or a monetary perspective. And there's no need for us to get in the mix. And as I mentioned earlier, there's only 4 of us, right? So to think that we can manage every aspect of every launch just isn't real. So we're really excited that we built the capability that can scale kind of with the organization.
Yeah. When thinking about how to keep these teams, motivated, incentivized, and also not maybe bringing legacy ways of doing things into their
Sure.
structures, how do you go about that? Like, how do you keep them excited and kind of scrappy in the way that either you bought them or built them?
Yeah, totally. And it's really hard, right? Because at the end of the day, we are a gigantic manufacturer, right? And we build the world's biggest brands, and that's what we've done for over 100 years. And so the idea of being scrappy and finding new ways to kind of go to market or better serve our consumers is always a challenge. But at the end of the day, what we love to do is we like to look at some of the best and kind of most sought after digitally native brands and say, what are they doing, right? Like how are they doing it right? Like what's their tickets to success? And are there some things that we can learn from them? For sure. There's some things that are just not possible to adopt 100%. But we started to look at those types of companies, and these aren't necessarily food and bev digitally native companies. Like just think of things like Allbirds. Think of things like, your favorite digitally native brand, like Away or Glossy or whatever it might be, right? We're like, we don't need necessarily to use our gigantic tech stack for a small kind of challenger brand. Yeah, when you get to our bigger brands, of course, like you do need some of those bigger kind of enterprise grade technologies. But at the end of the day, we can do a lot of damage with kind of the agile marketing tech stack that we've built, and that's truly what allows us to be scrappy and to keep teams energized when we can come to the table and say, hey, you guys want to go D2C? Let's think of it as a test because we can actually launch this in 90 days for not a ton of investment. And their eyes really light up because, from a more traditional sense, that's often taken a lot longer. And the idea that we're able to offer this capability and this ability to go D2C in such a short amount of time really opens up, opportunity. And that drives the excitement to kind of go towards this new strategy.
Yep. Yeah, it's such an interesting thought of like how to keep these teams motivated. Earlier, I was
Totally.
judging this SEO panel that BIC International runs, and apparently they run
Yeah.
these competitions. I think it's twice a quarter. And hearing, I mean, how excited these teams were getting just to improve, the SEO capabilities of just one single product and see who won. And there's leaderboards. Kind of opened my eyes to like what you can do to keep, team members excited and innovative and wanting to participate in maybe a way that's outside of their traditional job title, which was really fun to see.
Totally. And the other thing I'll mention too on just like excitement is I think, one thing that's driven a lot of people towards at least some D2C investigation or intrigue has been this idea of, importance of first party data, which is
Mhm.
nothing new to anyone who's listening to this podcast, right? But it's something that obviously as marketers and brand representatives, we're talking about constantly. How do we know our consumer better? How do we personalize every experience? How do we, do all of those things? And I think D2C has been a really interesting way to start to investigate that. It's a great way to collect some data. It's a great way to provide personalized experiences to consumers. And I think a lot of people are looking at this as a very tangible way to make that happen. And we're here for it. And we're happy to help any teams that are going down that road.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a unique ability to have access to maybe your, 5,000 true fans who are just waiting on, the
Totally.
product. I mean, what kind of surprises came up when you all of a sudden started having access to this first party data in a way that you hadn't before? Was there anything in the consumer data or anything that you saw that was actually quite surprising?
Yeah, I think, you'd mentioned 5,000, right? And, truly, we have some programs that's kind of the range of numbers, right? In the scheme
Mhm.
of things, it seems like a really small group of people. But at the end of the day, you said it best, right? They're our most avid fanatics. And the idea that we can serve our most avid fans of our best brands in better ways because we know them better is a really exciting opportunity. Now, if you go back and you say, well, maybe there's only 5,000, we need to validate the fact that that's really important. We haven't built infrastructure before to handle just 5,000 profiles, right?
Mhm.
And so the surprise was is we had to build a lot of that integration and build a lot of the infrastructure to handle the ingestion of that type of data. And our big thing is like, yeah, 5,000, sure, you can say whatever you want about that number. It's not big, it's not small, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, when we start launching these types of things every other week, and we know that the people that we are talking to and the people we're learning more about are some of our most avid fans. That's a really exciting thing for not only the brand, but for the broader organization that we can have that type of insight into consumers. It's something that's really new to us. And so I think that was the biggest surprise is just the fact that we did have to build some of that ingestion, infrastructure. And we're excited to have that online now. And it's no longer an issue for our brand teams, regardless of the number of data profiles and number of consumers you're looking to reach within D2C.
Yeah. Are there any fun, maybe real world events that you've been kind of merging your true fans with to kind of give them a different experience? Because what I keep
Yeah,
hearing is
for
that,
sure.
people are pent up demand around getting in the real world, connecting with, people like them, getting these experiences. How are you guys thinking about that?
Totally. So, maybe when I look back at the last year and some of the most exciting, launches that we've done via D2C, they haven't been the biggest, let's say. And I have to give such a kudos and a shout out to the brand leadership team and the idea leadership team and just really kind of people who came up with this. But Reese's did a really interesting partnership with the artist cause, right? And if you look, there's still some boxes floating around. They were in Walmart for a while and a couple of our other customers. But we wanted to do a special edition cereal box that was all around this partnership. And, the idea was just to serve our brand fanatics. It wasn't to sell a bunch of cereal. It was the idea that, we had X amount of boxes to unload. And we thought it was a really interesting way to really kind of put a tangible product in our consumers' hands. And so that was one of my favorite D2C drops, as we call it, to see, because it was live for a few seconds. That was about it.
Wow.
Because there's so much demand around it. And I didn't think the answer to this would actually tie back to the real world comment that you had made. But if you actually think about it, we were able to take all of that hype that had developed online. It was leaked on Reddit. People were talking about it in different, different places around the internet. And to say that, hey, not only do you have this excitement, but we're actually going to put one on your front step, right? And we're going to now, have one of these, cherished collector boxes sitting on the shelves of thousands of consumers around the country. Like, that's a pretty incredible thing that we were able to do because of D2C. And one of the things I love about kind of some of these more marketing focused opportunities is you don't have to just see it on your Instagram feed, right? You can actually engage with it and actually get a product in your hands in just a day or two. And that's thanks to this new capability. And in the past, we were only able to kind of limit that type of activation. I think it's exciting to see that we're actually able to do it in a more tangible way now.
Yeah. So since you've had quite a bit of experience going D2C now, I want to hear maybe some of the war stories where you're like, oh, if I were to
Of
do it
course.
over again, maybe think about this first, or, approach it this way because, this was a little failure or whatever you want to call it that, we learned not to do it that way now.
Yeah, totally. So I will, of course, as a true marketer, spin it into something that's an opportunity and something exciting. But
Yep. I'll try and poke
and
holes
this
in
is very,
it.
yeah, go for it. And this is in the trenches, right? And I hope people who are listening will appreciate this because it is very D2C focused. But as you can imagine, we have to oversee every part of this process, right? So it's not necessarily just the .com. It's not necessarily just the first party data. It's not just the transaction. Like we have to develop a whole like 3PL network to ship these things out, right? And for some of our early drops, you can imagine a lot of them are cereal boxes. We're General Mills. Like we own some of the most iconic cereal brands around. And so it's a lot of cereal boxes. And our 3PLs had found, what we thought was the best way to ship designer cereal boxes, right? So it was a brown box. We padded it appropriately. It was really kind of, it was logistically sound. They looked like, they looked like they did on pallets as they went out the door. And then we had a team come in actually from Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and they wanted to do a myriad of kind of these boxes, a series of them. And I always like to send at least one, to our office so I can see what the packaging looks like, make sure everything looks good. And it showed up, and it was this beautiful package with Cinemojis covering everything. And what I thought was really interesting was the fact that you can imagine how many brown boxes the logistics and delivery teams see all day, every day, including, probably families who are listening too, the Amazon boxes sit there, you're used to seeing that. But then you drive up and you see this just huge Cinemoji sitting on your front step. And I think for me, it just highlighted that the need to think about every single touch point, right? So though we were shipping brown boxes off and things were getting there without, being damaged or whatever, we never even thought really about the idea that we had this beautiful cereal box in the middle of this kind of gross brown, cardboard corrugate thing, right? And so now we've always pushed brand teams to figure out like, what is that unpacking experience? What is that unboxing experience? It's worth probably spending a couple more dollars to figure out like what that unboxing looks like. Because you know what? Like not only are you going to have a really happy consumer at the other end, everyone's going to talk about it. Everyone's going to see it. And the chances that, you share that with others around you or online is much higher. So I'll say not necessarily a war story, but a huge learning we've had, talking about kind of the full stack of D2C capabilities we've had to build.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it does seem like there's such an interesting way to create shareability by having something on the outside of the
Totally.
package that then people actually want to share or, see what it's all about or maybe where it came from. I mean, I always think that consumers would be more interested in how something is actually made or where it came from or whatever the story behind it. I mean, you see the TikTok videos where people are literally watching like how a
Totally.
cookie's made. And if people like
Yeah,
that, they probably would love to see how cereal's made. So much opportunity
for
just on the
sure.
outside of the box before they even open it.
Totally. Yeah. And that's just kind of an opportunity we identified. And now again, we're pushing everyone to do it because you look back at the cardboard box, like, that was very yesterday. So we're just constantly looking for different things, as we get, again, we're a pretty young team. So as we get to know our 3PL vendors and partner with them in different ways and find our packaging teams here at General Mills, like let's bring everyone together and do something that's really special. And now that we have that foundational capability in place, we can start to do that. And I think that's what I'm really excited for the year ahead is we've built the capability. Now it's on the brands to make it special. And that's what they do best. And I think it's gonna be really exciting.
That's awesome. So I want to hear a bit about what are maybe some of the new trends or technologies that you're watching. I mean, it seems like your team is perfectly positioned to be able to see everything that's coming down the pike and be like, maybe we should experiment with that one, or that one's too soon. What are you all
For
looking
sure.
at right now that maybe will or won't pay off? You don't know, but you're at least exploring it.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the biggest things we're looking at is, I can say the standard business, response to that is we're looking for, the shortest path to purchase with the least amount of friction would be my business response. I
Hmm.
think for me, like when you think about your, average internet use throughout the day, I always like to joke, like no one's like sitting in front of the TV at night, like cruising .coms, right? I'm just going to go to generalmills.com
Yeah.
slash whatever. I'm going to go to shop.wheaties.com or whatever that might be. Like, no one says that, right? Where we're sitting is truthfully, we're sitting hours and hours and hours on social platforms, mainly TikTok and Instagram, right? Especially for a lot of our target consumers. And so what we're trying to do is to say, do you really need a .com anymore? Like, do we
Hmm.
really need a .com, or can we just use, the back end of, Shopify or whatever it might be to fuel a true TikTok storefront, right? And that's actually where you buy the stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, like, why would I make my consumer go to a different location if they're already there? So we're really excited. We were one of the first, or we were the first food and bev brand to jump into TikTok storefronts, which we were really proud of. We did that with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and it allowed consumers to go right from the beautifully shot organic content on TikTok. The algorithm just amplifies to new degrees to actually purchasing some Cinnamon Toast Crunch gear in a matter of taps. And I think that's
Yep.
so important now. And so we're really doubling down on that. We're saying, why don't we just do it on TikTok? Why don't we just do it on Instagram? We have some incredible partners at each one of those platforms. And we're looking to say, D2C isn't necessarily a .com.
Hmm.
D2C is, think of it as a capability we've built. And you can bring this to life in whatever way you want. We're integrating commerce in every platform that consumers are spending time on. And more, it's on our phones and, on our iPads sitting in front of the TV. And if we can create that experience, then we're in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because it brings me back to 2016 when I was working at Google, and one of the senior engineers there, I mean, he was pretty high up. He said, I think domains will be a thing of the past very soon, and we won't
Totally.
actually really be
Yeah,
focused on the best domain names and sending people directly there. He didn't know or have a reason exactly why, but he's like, I feel like that's just really
sure.
like a historical process. And so now hearing you say
Right.
that D2C is not a .com, I mean, that perfectly summarizes where people are looking to shop.
I think, the innovation in that space has always been reserved, I think, for like fashion and beauty,
Hmm.
right? And I actually brought up, I think I compared ourselves to like, the Kardashian skincare, makeup or whatever, in one of my status. And he's like, wait, did you just compare our business to, this? And I was like, yeah, well, these brands are always on the forefront. They're always doing new things. They always get the opportunity. I'm fighting every day for us to get our products just, um, have the same shot and to be that innovative and be that forward thinking. We want to be the first and the best and the only. We don't want to be the first, best, only food. We
Hmm.
want to kind of take on those opportunities and really kind of push into those new territories past the .com, as your old coworker said, to figure out what's new and next, and how do we, provide a better experience for our consumers at the end of the day.
How were you guys designing experiences on TikTok? Because I've heard such mixed, thoughts on whether TikTok works or not. And obviously, you're saying, hey, it works really well if you do it right. Like, how are you creating a fun experience on there that's actually connecting with the consumers in a way where they want to buy after?
Well, I'll be honest, we were in the early innings, right? Both from a capabilities on all of our all of our kind of all of our standings, right? So to say it's perfect is far from reality. We are testing aggressively, I would say, into new opportunities, and I'm really proud of the partnership that we've built with that team. To say, again, to I mentioned in the last, answer, like we want to be the first to test this. Like we have the infrastructure, like we're ready to go. Thanks to like again the D2C kind of world because we have 3PLs, we can ship product, we do all of that already. So like let's take a shot at it. It positions us to dive in really fast. Now, I will say that's all great. We do lean on the brands though, because brands need to have a very specific TikTok strategy, right?
Hmm.
And I don't get into that because that's not my world. And I lean on their, leadership teams and their agency partners and everyone who's involved in that to kind of say, what do we do on this platform? Like, what is our positioning? Is it paid? Is it organic? Is it a mix? Is it like, what's our messaging? And like, again, like I lean on the brand leaders who are the best at doing that, know their brand's the best to define that. And then where we come into play is like, how do we level in or kind of layer in commerce to whatever that strategy is and whatever is working? So we work hand in hand with a lot of our media agencies, both paid and organic, to say what's working, what's not. Like, what are opportunities for commerce? We have access to these tools now. What about A, B, and C? What do you think? And they might come back and say, X, Y, and Z is actually better. We'll say, great, we can adapt to that. And so from a TikTok standpoint, back to your question, it's different for every brand, different based on your audience, different based on your content. And I think brands are learning now what stuff really gets traction on the platform. We're here to provide the best of the best commerce experiences, whether it's in paid units or in organic content or in your profile, whatever it might be. We have the tools to make that happen.
Yeah. What about keeping your audience? I mean, getting the one purchase is nice, but what happens? Like, are you trying to direct them somewhere else afterwards? Or are you just trying to get them to, stay with you on TikTok, where maybe you don't own as much, data on them as you could on, like a first party type website? How do you think about that?
Totally. Yeah. So if we dive into the specifics, like right now, a lot of the tactics we're using use TikTok as a jumping off point. And whether it's within platform or whether it drives to a different .com, we're starting there and driving them into a shopping experience. The great thing, as I mentioned earlier about D2C is, once we, transact, right? Once we create that initial relationship with the consumer, we can now communicate with them post purchase, which is great. So unlike Instagram and unlike kind of the old days of Facebook, where you're always looking for likes and follows and kind of views, we're kind of moving on from that, right? Like,
Yeah.
TikTok isn't inherently focused around that. It's focused around the Discover tab. And so if we can transact a purchase on TikTok through our Shopify setup, like we now have a great relationship with that consumer. And that gets within kind of the other layers of D2C. We love looking at D2C as not just a transaction, which a lot of people just think about, but as kind of a one-on-one kind of direct to consumer engagement model. And so you can imagine we have all the data, we know where they came from, we know what they bought, we know who they are. And so we can add incredible amounts of personalized value to everything. So if we want to keep them, right? If you buy a 30-day pack of a product of ours, you better believe on day 20 that we want to reach out and ask if you want to order again, right? If you don't choose to order again, maybe there's something that we did wrong, or maybe we could try a different thing, or maybe you didn't like the products, we want to try a different flavor. Maybe a coupon would help you kind of get over the hump of ordering again. And I think all of those are a win. The fact that we can constantly kind of stay in touch in a direct to consumer way, regardless if they're coming from TikTok, regardless if they dropped in a .com from a different promotion, we can now do this thanks to the infrastructure. So it's not specifically on TikTok. As we move commerce more closely and independently into the social platforms, I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of what the longevity and kind of loyalty model look like. But for now, we're in a really good spot because we're creating that one-on-one D2C type relationship with these consumers and driving personalized value for them in whatever way we think and what they think is best.
Yeah. What about things like NFTs? I mean, when you're talking about product drops, it seems like a perfect spot to be able to, use NFTs in that. Are you guys thinking about that yet too?
Totally. So if you guys followed some of the most recent press releases, Dunkaroos was one of the first brands to kind of dive into the NFT world over a year ago now. And you guys should look up the Gushers work that our Gushers team is putting out kind of in the metaverse world with some virtual footwear, which is really exciting, right? So
That's fun.
definitely Google that. You'll see a picture pop up hopefully as you're typing that in, and the shoes look pretty cool. But anyways, one of the capabilities we're really
Those are cool. Yeah, it literally looks
they're
like
really interesting.
wow, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Again, kudos to those teams who really kind of led the charge, right? They're identifying that their audience wants this and really finding ways to activate. What we're super proud of is that, we've built in the ability to actually do NFT sales through our D2C infrastructure.
Mhm.
We're working with a couple brands to launch. I can't really talk too much about it, but the idea in this new kind of Web3 world of accessibility, right, for consumers are focused to get into the market. We want to create the most friction-free path to purchase or engagement or loyalty, whatever it might be possible. And traditionally, because NFTs and the Web3 world are so new, it's not the best user experience. Creating a wallet and kind of us being your first in, it's really difficult. And so we've partnered with a few providers to allow our brands to deploy NFTs and mint NFTs just as easy as they would be deploying a product or, a sweatshirt with the brand name on it. And so now we're able to facilitate that just with the same amount of ease we are in any other Shopify or kind of D2C focused site. And we're super excited to offer that to our brand teams. And we see a lot of interest in that in the future. Now, what they do with it, that's where the creative energy comes into play, right? The Gushers work and the Dunkaroos work I just mentioned. That's the brand teams, right? We're providing the tools to make that possible and to make selling NFTs on behalf of the brand possible. Now, the examples I mentioned are in a direct correlation to that, but we're working on a couple of interesting things incoming that will allow us to do that. And we have the infrastructure to make it possible now.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm asking about this. I mean, is there like, are you helping think about the strategy when they're doing these NFT drops, or is that really just, on that team where you're like, I don't even know, what their KPIs are around launching shoes?
Totally. That is all on that team. With
Okay.
D2C, we don't see a ton of D2C overlap with some of those with that type of work. And they're obviously working with their partnerships team and their agency teams to make that real.
Hmm.
We're constantly, just like we were pushing D2C a year ago, we're constantly trying to think of, that's awesome. How do we scale that? How do we use some of the D2C tools and infrastructure to bring that to the next level? How do we get to more people? How do we get more people in on the next whatever Dunkaroos wants to do next with their NFTs? And I think we're excited by that. And I think when we see digital products now being such a prevalent, artifact in today's society, I think, D2C has a lot of opportunity there. We're also exploring some really interesting things around data that we can get. When we have wallets actually purchase some of our products, we can see what else that wallet is doing and potentially
Okay.
see how we better serve that consumer, but just in a little bit of a different way.
What kind of things will it show you around like what the wallets are doing? Because that seems, I've always thought of it as like that's really anonymous and it's pretty hard to tell what people are doing, in that space.
Yeah. So, obviously you can go back and you can look and see the history of the wallet and see what wallets are purchasing and owning and
Hmm.
things like that. As we look to kind of get away from the cookie world and we look to do, kind of something different, we think it's not our kind of forefront of kind of our Web3 strategy, but what we're really looking to do is figure out how do we add benefit first to the consumer? Are we running programs that actually serve the consumer better? After that, we start to look at, again, just like we are with first party data, we're looking at saying, what do we know about this consumer now? And how do we better kind of personalize the experience to really serve them in a better way? We're not quite sure what the opportunities are there. Obviously, we're not quite sure about a lot of things in Web3,
Yeah.
but we think it's an interesting space that we're constantly investigating and, have a lot of experiments running in.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that's a really interesting future opportunity, especially when people do start using wallets more often. There has to be a certain like penetration point, which I'm sure is still pretty small. Only the, hyper users who already have bought maybe many NFTs and are already in that world. But I mean, it's interesting thinking about what you could eventually do and, yeah, be able to
100%.
help the consumers in a different way. That's cool. So I want to hear, I love asking this question. What's, a contrarian thought you have that maybe your team, your other three team members would disagree with you on when it comes to, the world of D2C?
Oh, that is hard. We've done some really interesting work with a couple of startups that are all around using a lot of acronyms here, but not NFTs, not non-fungible tokens, but NFC. So
What's an NFC?
near field communication device. So think about like your Apple Pay, right? Or
Okay.
you can do very similar things with QR codes.
Okay.
Um, we were partnering with a startup just a couple months ago where you were actually able to either scan a QR code or tap an NFC tag, which they're cost about a penny, and you can put them in a
Mhm.
sticker. Really, they're anywhere. Um, but what it did was it launched really Apple Pay on your phone, and you could actually transact with a single tap. Like again, I know everyone talks about minimal clicks and minimal taps, etc.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like you could scan and transact and have something on your way to your door in less than a second. And it used Apple Pay and it did some really interesting things. The company called Batch, great
Okay.
team over there. It was a ton of fun to work with them. But I was so excited by this opportunity. Again, this was months ago. It's like, oh, think about what we can do with this. The idea of us taking friction to basically zero and finding new ways to drive transaction, whether you're at a festival or getting a package in the mail. Like, I am all about it. And I think my team was so focused on everything else, building the infrastructure. They're working on the .coms, they're working on the media plans, they're working on logistics, and I'm over here gallivanting around about this QR code that I think is really interesting. And I think the collective eye roll for my group was probably pretty strong. At the end of the day, like I still stay in touch with Batch. I still think they're a great company. They're doing some really great work. We're excited to try to find another way in for them. But maybe the fact that my team isn't fully on board with it is probably why maybe it's been a slower process than we might have liked to see.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting answer. I mean, I could see a lot of functionality with that, especially, I mean, I'm the type of person where I'll get in the grocery store and if the line's long or if, I have to get a bunch of spring waters and I don't want to carry it, I will literally just leave. And if I could
Right.
just, scan it and all of a sudden it shows up my doorstep, I mean, within a day or two would be nice. I would probably opt for that just so I don't I mean, I'm apparently very lazy, but I'm like, just so I don't have to go up to the cash register and check
100%.
out.
Well, and you see Scan and Go taking hold in a lot of retailers around the country, right? The idea
Mhm.
that you don't have to go through that is huge. And I think we were excited by the opportunity that it might have driven. And I think the excitement from the rest of my team wasn't maybe as sharp.
Well, I'm glad I asked that because that gives me a whole new, rabbit hole to dive down and learn more
100%.
about. So that's cool. Okay, last question. What are you most excited about within the next year? It can be, personally in your own life. It can be what you're up to at General Mills. You can take it wherever you want.
Yeah, for sure. We have been working super hard to get our infrastructure in place from a D2C ecom perspective here at Mills. And I think we are finally at a spot that we are, you know, excited by a bulletproof system that can be used in many different ways. And we're seeing just success across the board come from that. What I'm excited is the fact that we're able to wrap that up and really call this a capability, and scale it across the organization while our team moves on to what's next, right? So I talked about some of the social commerce stuff. I talked about how do we bring this into away from the .com into new territories. What are places that General Mills can own in terms of creating the most personalized, best consumer experiences possible? And I'm really excited for our team to say, hey, the infrastructure is in place. Teams are running with it. Teams are seeing their own success. Again, where the coach, the quarterback is just crushing on the field. We can now figure out what that next recruit is. Who are we bringing in next? So like, what's the new technology? What's the new team? How do we look at more creative opportunities around the organization? And that's what we're looking to do. So our new fiscal year starts here in a couple of weeks. And we're excited to use that as this awesome pivot point. We're launching a bunch of new D2C sites here in the next week or so. And we're going to be able to start looking at kind of what's new and next. That's what I'm really excited about. So that's that from a professional standpoint. And I think, our team is growing. We're having a ton of fun, and we can't wait to see what we build in the next 12 months.
So cool. All right, let's shift over to the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to you by Salesforce Commerce Cloud. This is where I ask you a question and you have a minute or less to answer. Are you ready, Carter?
Yes, we'll do it.
All right. When was the last time you tried something new?
Last time I tried something new. I just went to the Modern Retail D2C conference and got to try a whole bunch of new products. So
Ooh.
can't think of them by name, but there's a bunch of really incredible founders there who all brought products. Some of them in different phases of development. It was a ton of fun to bring that back. So
That sounds cool.
yeah, it was awesome, but it was good. It was just fun to see these founders and what they worked so hard to build. And yeah, it was great. So and a myriad of things, everything from hand soap to jewelry to food to everything. So it was great.
That's awesome. If you could choose one book as mandatory reading for e-commerce leaders, which book would you choose?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I'm Here's the thing is selfishly, or not selfishly, somewhat embarrassingly, I'm a Scott Galloway fan, right?
Why
And I
embarrassing?
think
That's not embarrassing.
well, some people are like, oh, I don't like the guy.
No, I like
I've
him.
listened to him since day one, and I think he's just a really great, um, thought leader in the space. And I know he's not e-commerce specific. So, you have The Four, which is a great book, right? That came out. We're really talking about, the four major tech companies and what they have. And then he has Algebra of Happiness, which I know is more of a personal slant, but I thought it was really impactful for kind of the stuff he talks about and the stuff I take personally to life. So that's also good. I'm listing three. And then his other book, Post Corona, I think is super interesting and talking about some of the shifts we've seen in kind of the world. And I think that has impact across the entire space. But ecom was a huge focus of that book. I'm hoping I get the title right. I have like all of them sitting in hardcover at my desk, but I took the titles off of them or the covers off of them.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, point being, Post Corona is awesome. It's a really good book. I want to make sure that it is.
Yeah,
I'm
check
not
it.
saying that wrong. But yeah, I would say that is something that I really enjoy.
Oh, yeah. You got it right. Post-corona. From crisis
All
to
right, sweet.
opportunity. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
That's awesome. Oh, I will have to check those out because I am a fan of him too. Next
Definitely.
question. What do you think is true, but it might actually just be good marketing?
Oh, it's such a good question. This was really hard because I don't want to trash any of our work, even though I know we've had some stepping stones along the way. But I think D2C is commerce only, right? The idea that D2C means that it just means I'm buying something directly, from a manufacturer. I don't think is true anymore. I think D2C is much broader than that. And I think like we're doing an interesting job trying to transition even our own company to think differently. But as I mentioned earlier, like in the podcast, like again, we're not selfish on where you want to purchase this. And again, we're lucky enough to have distribution at major retailers and different places around the globe. But the idea that D2C is just to buy isn't right. D2C is this idea that we're able to, again, create that shortest path to purchase with the least amount of friction and create that incredible kind of one-on-one consumer interaction that allows us to drive personalization, allows us to drive that direct kind of consumer communication, allows us to, deliver better for whatever they need. And I think that's the big shift I believe we're seeing, and I believe it's true, and I believe it's also good marketing. So hopefully that's a sufficient answer to the question.
All right. Well, that was great, Carter. I really had fun talking to you today. So thank you for joining the show and hanging out with me for this past hour. Until next time, where can people learn more about you and what you're up to at General Mills?
Yeah, for sure. So as most people, I love LinkedIn. And so you can catch me on LinkedIn. You can just type in Carter Jensen. I think there's one of three of us in the United States. So we're all friends on LinkedIn, just so you know. So if you find one, you find us all.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best. And obviously you can check out any of our brands, all the amazing work they're doing on any of your favorite social platforms or on our .com. So check out some of the new D2C stores launching here in the next couple of weeks. We have a lot of exciting work coming down the line.
If you're looking for the #1 platform for all things commerce, there's no better choice. So definitely go check it out at salesforce.com/commerce.